My family humiliated me my whole life, but when they mocked my daughter playing piano, I kicked them out and my sister called child services. Now I have a restraining order and a lawsuit that left them speechless. I'm 37 years old. I work as an IT consultant, and I need to tell this story because what happened about 3 months ago with my parents basically blew up my entire family, and honestly, I'm still processing all of it. I guess I should start by explaining a bit of context, because none of this makes sense without understanding what Christopher and Helen, my parents, are like and what my relationship with them has been my whole life. I grew up in a house where basically nothing you did was ever good enough, you know? My dad, Christopher, was always one of those arrogant types who think they know everything better than everyone. And my mom, Helen, has this passive-aggressive thing where she never tells you directly that you're doing something wrong, but she makes sure you know with poisoned comments. I was the oldest kid, and my sister Samantha came along like 4 years after me. And from the beginning it was obvious she was the favorite. Like very obvious. Everything Samantha did was perfect, she was brilliant, she was wonderful. I could get straight A's in school and my dad would just say something like, "Well, that's the minimum we expect from you," but Samantha would get a B and it was cause for celebration. I don't know. I grew up with that and eventually accepted it. I mean, it's not like I liked it, but I learned to live with it. I got married young, like at 25, to Natalie. We had Abigail when I was 27. And honestly, those first years were good. But Natalie and I just didn't work out long term. We had different visions of life, and we divorced when Abigail was like 5. It was relatively amicable, all things considered, and we have shared custody that works pretty well. Abigail spends 1 week with me, 1 week with her mom, and we're both good parents, so in that sense, there's no drama. But during the marriage and after the divorce, I kept my parents at a prudent distance. You know what I mean? I'd see them on holidays, send them pictures of Abigail, but I didn't let them get too involved in our lives because I already knew how they were. Fast forward to about 3 months ago. Abigail is 10 now, and she's an incredible kid. Seriously. She's sweet, curious, loves learning new things. Like 2.5 months ago, she decided she wanted to learn piano. I don't know anything about music, zero, but if my daughter wants to learn piano, well, we're gonna get her piano lessons. I hired a teacher who comes to the house twice a week. We bought a decent digital keyboard, not a full piano, because I don't have space or money for that, but a good one. And Abigail was super excited. She practiced every day for like half an hour, and within 2 weeks she could already play a small piece, something simple but recognizable. I think it was like a simplified version of Ode to Joy or something like that. So my parents mentioned they wanted to come for dinner, which happens maybe every 2 or 3 months. I don't invite them often because, well, I already explained how they are. But I also don't want Abigail to have no relationship with her grandparents, so I said yes. The thing is that Abigail was so excited to show them what she'd learned on the piano. She spent the whole week saying, "I'm going to play for Grandpa and Grandma. They're going to love it." I practiced extra so it would come out well. And I, like an idiot, thought that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. That they'd see their granddaughter proud of something she'd accomplished and be, I don't know, normal, caring. But looking back, I should have known better. The dinner day arrived, a Friday night. I'd made lasagna, which is something I know how to make decently, and Abigail had set the table all nice with folded napkins and everything. My parents arrived around 7, Christopher with his usual attitude like he was doing everyone a favor with his presence, and Helen with that fake smile she has. We ate dinner, and the conversation was the typical stuff. Christopher, talking about his work, he's retired but still does consulting, Helen asking things about my life, but in that way where you feel like she's looking for something to criticize. I was already half tense, but I was managing it. After dinner, Abigail told them, "Do you want to hear me play the piano?" I practiced a lot, and I saw their faces, like, Christopher put on this expression like, "Oh no, I have to pretend interest." And Helen said something like, "Oh, how nice, honey." Of course, but with that tone that didn't sound genuine at all. But Abigail didn't notice. Or if she noticed, she didn't care because she was so excited. She sat down at the keyboard in the living room, and I stood there, feeling proud. You know? because my daughter had worked hard on this and was about to show it. She started playing. And yes, it wasn't perfect, obviously. It had been 2 weeks of lessons. She's a 10-year-old kid. Her fingers still stumble on the keys sometimes. The timing wasn't perfect. But I could tell the effort. You could tell she'd practiced. And she was doing it with so much concentration and pride that I didn't care if she made mistakes or not. When she finished, she turned toward us with this huge smile, waiting, for a reaction, and Christopher laughed. It wasn't like a small, polite laugh. It was a real guffaw. And then Helen started laughing too, covering her mouth but not trying very hard to hide it. And Christopher said, "Well, I guess we all have to start somewhere, right?" That sounded like, well, I don't want to be mean, but it sounded like when the cat walks across the keyboard. And Helen added, between laughs, "Maybe music isn't your thing, honey. There are other things you can try." Abigail's face. God, I'm never going to forget the face she made. Her smile dropped immediately, and I saw her eyes fill with tears. She just sat there, with her hands still on the keys, completely destroyed. And I felt something in my chest I'd never felt, like a rage, so intense that my hands were literally shaking. Because one thing is for them to treat me like garbage my whole life. I'd already accepted that. But doing that to my daughter, mocking her when she was so proud and vulnerable, that was something else entirely. I didn't think, I just reacted. I told them, "Get out of my house. Now." And Christopher looked at me like I was the crazy one, saying, "Oh, come on, we were just joking. Don't be so sensitive." And I yelled, "I don't care. Get out of my damn house now." I think I'd never yelled at them like that in my life. Helen started with her thing of, "I don't understand why you're so upset. We were just being honest." And I literally started pushing them toward the door. I told them, "You have 30 seconds to leave before I call the police." And honestly, I would have done it. They left, Christopher muttering something about how I'd gone crazy, and Helen with an offended victim face. As soon as I closed the door, I ran to Abigail, who was crying on the couch. I hugged her and told her she'd done amazing, that I was super proud of her, that her grandparents were wrong and were idiots. She just cried, saying, "But I did it wrong. That's why they laughed." And I swore to her, that she hadn't done anything wrong, that what happened was that her grandparents are cruel people who don't know how to appreciate effort and talent. It took me like an hour to calm her down, and when she finally went to sleep, I was still shaking with rage. That night I couldn't sleep. I was up all night thinking about all the times my parents had made me feel small, inadequate, not enough. And I realized I'd let it happen because, I don't know, I thought it was normal or that I deserved it or something. But seeing them do the same thing to Abigail, that was unacceptable. I wasn't going to let her grow up feeling like I felt. The next day, I sent them a text. It was long, basically saying that what they did was cruel and unforgivable, that until they could treat Abigail with respect and genuine love, they weren't welcome in our lives. I told them I wasn't going to let them hurt my daughter like they hurt me. And I blocked their numbers after sending it, because I didn't want to hear their excuses or justifications. I thought that would be the end of it, that they'd understand the message and leave me alone. But no. Like 2 days later, my sister Samantha called me, and Samantha was furious. She started yelling at me about how dare I treat our parents like that they were elderly. They're like 65, not exactly elderly, and that I was a horrible son. I explained what happened, told her exactly how they mocked Abigail, and she just said, "Well, they were probably being honest. The kids only had 2 weeks of lessons. What did you expect?" And I told her, I expected them to act like decent grandparents who support their granddaughter, not like school bullies. Samantha kept defending them, saying, "I've always been too sensitive, that I always exaggerate everything." Basically all the classic arguments from someone who's never been the target of abuse because she's the favorite. In the end, I told her, "You know what, Samantha? You're never going to understand because they never treated you like they treated me. They always adored you. Everything you did was fine. I could do whatever, and it was never enough. So don't come telling me I exaggerate when you have no idea what it's like to live with that. And if you're going to keep defending them instead of seeing what really happened, then you're not welcome in my life either. And I hung up. I blocked her too. But Samantha, being how she is, didn't stay quiet. Turns out she called Natalie, my ex, and told her I was acting erratic and irrational, that I'd yelled at our parents for no reason, that I'd thrown family out of my house, and that maybe we should consider if I was fit to have Abigail. I mean, she was literally suggesting Natalie should fight for full custody. Natalie, who's reasonable, thank God, called me to ask what the hell was going on. I explained everything, every detail, and she said, "Okay, I understand. Your parents are terrible, and you had every right to throw them out. But I'm worried Samantha is turning this into something legal." And she was right to worry. Over the next few days, I started getting messages from uncles, cousins, family I don't even see almost ever, all saying I was a bad son, that my parents were devastated. How could I do this to them after everything they'd done for me? What exactly had they done for me? It was never clear to me. Helen had apparently called the whole family crying, telling her version where I went crazy for no reason and threw them out of my house yelling obscenities at them. Without mentioning, obviously, the part where they mocked my daughter. I blocked everyone. Every number that sent me a hate message. Blocked. I didn't have time or energy to explain myself to people I've already decided I was the villain. Then came Helen's email. Because even though I blocked her phone, I hadn't blocked her email yet. It was long, dramatic, full of that emotional manipulation she does so well. It said things like, "We always knew you'd have problems raising Abigail alone. Maybe it would be better if you let us help you more. We could even take her to our state some summers to give her a more complete education." I mean, she was basically suggesting I give up my daughter part of the time. And it ended saying that if I really loved Abigail, I'd recognize she needed more adult guides in her life, specifically them. I didn't respond. I simply blocked the email and archived everything. But it was clear this wasn't going to stop. And then the worst thing happened. Like 2 weeks after all this, a Tuesday afternoon, I was working from home and Abigail was at school when there was a knock on the door. I opened it and it was Christopher. He just showed up, no warning, nothing. He told me, "We need to talk. This has gone too far." And I told him, "No, we don't need to talk. You need to leave my property." He insisted, trying to push the door to come in, saying it was ridiculous, that I was behaving like a child, that he had a right to see his granddaughter. I told him, "You have no rights here. I'm asking you to leave. If you don't leave, I'm going to call the police." And he laughed, like he couldn't believe I'd really do it. So I took out my phone and dialed 911 inches front of him. And that's when he realized I was serious. He started backing up, saying, Okay, I'm leaving, but this doesn't end here." And he left. When the operator answered, I explained there was someone unwanted on my property, but he was already leaving. They asked if I needed them to send a patrol anyway, and I said yes, just so there'd be a record. They came, took my statement, told me if he showed up again to call them. I thought that was the lowest point, that it couldn't get worse. But I was wrong. Like 3 days later, a Friday afternoon, there was another knock on the door. It was Abigail who opened it because she'd just gotten home from school. And it was a CPS social worker, Child Protective Services. My heart literally stopped. The woman introduced herself, said they'd received an anonymous report that Abigail was in a potentially dangerous environment, that the father was emotionally unstable, that there was aggression in the home. I stood there trying to process what the hell was happening. I told her, "You can come in, check whatever you want. This is obviously false." And she came in, was very professional, but you could tell she had to do her job. She talked to me, talked to Abigail alone, checked the house, the refrigerators, the rooms. I showed her everything, explained the whole situation with my parents, gave her names, dates, everything. I gave her Natalie's number so she could call and verify there was no custody problem. And when she talked to Abigail, my daughter told her she was happy, that she felt safe, that her dad was the best and had never done anything bad to her. The social worker told me the report specifically mentioned that I'd yelled obscenities at my parents in front of the child, that there was aggressive behavior, that I was isolating Abigail from her family. I explained exactly what happened, why I threw my parents out, the cruelty with which they treated Abigail. The social worker was understanding more and more, and in the end she told me it was obvious the report was malicious, that there was no real concern. She said she'd close the case without action because there was no foundation. But she warned me that whoever made the report might try again, and that I should document everything. As soon as she left, I called Natalie and told her. And she said, "It has to have been Samantha, right?" And I knew she was right. My sister had made a false report to CPS to try to cause me problems. That was the limit. The next day, Monday morning, I hired a lawyer. I explained the whole situation, showed him all the messages, Helen's email, told him about Christopher showing up at my house, the CPS report. The lawyer told me I had a solid case for a restraining order against Samantha for the false report and harassment, and that we could send a cease and desist letter to my parents, warning them that if they kept trying to contact me or showed up on my property, we'd take legal action. We did both things. The restraining order against Samantha was approved temporarily, and we have a hearing in like 2 weeks to make it permanent. My parents received the cease and desist letter, and according to my lawyer, they haven't tried to contact me since. Christopher sent me one last message before the letter arrived, telling me I'd destroyed the family, that I'd regret it, that I was going to die alone and bitter. I forwarded it to my lawyer as additional evidence. And here we are. Abigail is still taking piano lessons, by the way. Now she's been doing it for like 2.5 months, and she's improving a lot. We did a mini recital at home where we invited Natalie and Natalie's boyfriend, and we all clapped and genuinely congratulated her. She's happy, feels supported. She's never asked about her grandparents or why they don't come anymore, which tells me that probably on some level she already knew they weren't good people. Sometimes I feel guilty, you know? Because technically I took her grandparents away. But then I remember their faces mocking her, their cruel laughter, and I know I did the right thing. Some people don't deserve to be in your life just because they share your blood. The hearing for the permanent restraining order is in 2 weeks. My lawyer says that with the false CPS report and all the documented harassment, it's almost certain we'll get it. And honestly, I hope I never have to see Samantha again. As for my parents, if they respect the cease and desist letter, I won't take more legal action. But if they try anything else, I'm prepared to fight. I've been in therapy since all this happened, processing all the emotional abuse from my childhood that I'd ignored or minimized. It's hard, but necessary. Abigail asked me the other day if she was ever going to see her grandparents again. I told her the truth, that I didn't know, but that for now it was better that they were separated. She thought for a moment and said, "It's okay. They were never very affectionate with me anyway." And that broke my heart a little, but also reminded me why I did all this. To protect her. To give her something better than what I had.